So welcome everybody. Today we are going to learn about paints and coatings green specification training presented by the Maryland Green Purchasing Committee. My name is Sam Linton. Most of you know me, but my main role is the data coordination for green purchasing, but also developing specifications and then doing trainings like these for when we develop a new spec and get it published. We like to have a spec training to go over the requirements and make sure everyone's on the same page. And what's nice about this is that there's a paint care program that has launched recently that we will mention that is being run by the state of Maryland. So a lot of new good developments have come recently in the paints and coatings category. So this is a great time to go over the spec and those requirements. So without further ado, I will get started. We're going to learn how to access all the GPC specifications, go over those statutory requirements, general statutory requirements, as well as the ones related to buying paint products, understanding what those environmental attributes are that make paint products green. We'll go over eco-labels or environmental certifications that are awarded for the paints and coating product category. And we'll learn how to use the spec to achieve agency compliance. I don't think we'll be going over too much specifically over the vendor e-commerce platforms. So I did want to brief disclaimer there, but there are some resources of where to find green paint products. So how to access the specifications. Vicky's already a step ahead of me, but the DGS homepage, you can access it through, or the GPC homepage, you can access it through DGS under 4 state agencies, and green purchasing will be right there. Googling Maryland Green Purchasing will also take you to the homepage. And then on the right panel, there is a specifications tab under resources. And as you go to paints and coatings, the spec will be available to upload in PDF format. You can open the spec and follow along if you'd like, or you can just follow along with the presentation. Most of what we have here is what's included in the spec. So I will continue now on to what is a green purchasing specification. It's a list of minimum requirements that have to be met in order for, in this case, paint products to be purchased by the state. It includes what we cannot buy in this category. It also includes what we recommend to go above and beyond just the standard requirements. And also a lot of environmentally preferable purchasing language that you can implement while using the spec in future solicitations or when you're buying paint directly for your agency. It works in both cases. So, and also all of the legislation and statutes that tie into paints and coatings. So by using the spec, all of the language that you need is accounted for. We do all the work up front to publish these specifications, and they have been vetted by the committee, making sure that what we are requiring can actually be met on the other end, making sure that it's commercially available on the market, making sure that the environmental certifications that we reference are indeed a third-party verification that doesn't contribute to greenwashing. So a lot of things covered in the specifications, whether it's legislation, language, and basically the meat and potatoes of the spec, which is those minimum requirements. So we're gonna go into the paint spec now. This spec, this is the scope of what we cover in this specification. There are a wide variety of different paints and coatings products, but we think that this covers most of it. latex paints, interior and exterior, primers and block fillers, floor and wall coatings, interior and exterior, metal primers, and traffic marking. So I intentionally added these images here to represent that these do meet all of the minimum requirements that I am going to explain further. And we'll go into what those are in a bit. But first, we'll look at what the legislative requirements for procurement officers and agencies are for this spec. You'll see a lot of these general legislative requirements in all of our specifications, but it's really important to hit home what those general requirements are. Environmentally preferable purchasing, that, you know, that whole regulation in COMAR is why myself and Vicky do all of this work, to publish specs, to do trainings, to keep track of what we're buying and all of those things. So all procuring agencies are required to buy green. They shall purchase environmentally preferable products and services. There are these 3 caveats: do not perform adequately for the intended use, exclude adequate competition, or not available at a reasonable price in a reasonable period of time. But in this training, I'm going to go over why those 3 caveats don't come into play, and that it is adequately for its intended use, doesn't exclude competition, and it is comparable and competitive pricing to those of just standard paint products. Mercury and products that contain mercury. Again, this is in all of our specifications, but products must not contain mercury or containing the least amount of mercury necessary to meet those performance requirements. More so related to paint for procurement officers and agencies. Lead paint. I know that probably haven't been using lead paint in a while, but there is a statute that prohibits that. May not use lead paint on any surface, whether interior or exterior, or on any porch of any dwelling. The only case it can be used is for lead-based industrial paint that is applied to a household appliance on any article that is intended for household use. So I have to have very strong reason to actually have to use that. So continuing on, and this is a big part of the paint spec. In COMAR, there's a table for VOC content limits for architectural and industrial maintenance coatings. Those, and Vicky just shared that here, those list all of the different architectural and industrial paints and coatings, and they will include the concentration limit that it must not exceed. We'll see pictures of that table as we go on. And Sonia, did you have a question or comment? Or did you ask me?
I did. I was curious about what you just said about mercury again. Did you say
For the products containing mercury?
yeah, did you say no mercury should be in the
Right.
product?
Right. No products for mercury and products that contain mercury. Basically, no, products can't contain mercury unless there are no commercially available mercury-free products for specific application.
Okay.
And in those cases, it must contain the least amount of mercury necessary in order to just meet that product's performance. So basically,
Okay.
mercury-free products, unless absolutely have to include it, and then in that case, the least amount possible. Yep, Carlicia?
So is there a separate legislation for lead? Like lead and mercury, they don't go hand in hand, right?
Well, there are some instances for like lead when they're talking about heavy metals and packaging, and that's actually something that I'll get into, but they cover there is a statute for lead in the packaging components of products, but when this is specifically just buying the product itself, that they were relating it to mercury free. Does that make sense?
I'm sorry.
Well, you're
yes,
muted.
yeah, sorry.
COMAR covers mercury requirement, yeah. So in statute, the lead-based paint is the prohibition. In COMAR is where you'll find the products containing mercury regulation. Okay, so legislative requirements, and these are for contractors, bidders, and offers. The first one, which a lot of you have the GPS certification, so I'm sure you're aware of this one, verifying environmental claims. If claim to have a green product or claim to offer a green product and claim that it is green, those claims of those environmental attributes have to be consistent with the FTC's guidelines for the use of environmental marketing terms. So you can't just say it's eco-friendly, it's all natural, it's you know, those buzzwords that you see a lot of times. So it has to be proven. There has to be some certification, some standards, some environmental attribute that it is actually tied to. And then these limitations and prohibitions on heavy metals in packaging, which I did touch on a little bit. But basically, the manufacturer distributor, they can't use packaging components or any product in a package that basically has intentionally added either lead, cadmium, mercury, hexavalent chromium, or any of those hazardous chemicals. And speaking of limitations on hazardous substances, a person also cannot manufacture, sell, or distribute to the state a new product that contains more than 1/10 of 1% of penta-BDE or octa-BDE. Those are hazardous substances that we don't want to get in human contact. So, and that is in statute and in basically all of our specifications. So this is kind of a more of a general one, not necessarily a paint specific one, but has to be mentioned in this case. So for shipping and transport, in order to avoid idling, this statute is also included. A motor vehicle engine may not be allowed to operate for more than 5 consecutive minutes when the vehicle is not in motion, except as follows. There are some caveats, but this in general is when paint products, in this case, are being shipped over and being delivered, that the vehicle idling is reduced, and to be mindful of that because it is in statute. So moving on to what we cannot buy for, in this case, paint products. I did mention lead paint as one of them. And any paint products that exceed those VOC limits in that table in COMAR, Vicky did share it, but I will go over the slide. Anything that exceeds those limits is prohibited for purchase. The contractor also prohibited from selling that packaging or selling products that contain the heavy metals in packaging, and also the products that exceed that 1/10 of 1% penta-BDE, those hazardous substances. So you can't purchase anything that exceeds those hazardous substances, the heavy metals, no lead-based paint, and if they do have VOCs, which typically most, if not all, paints do have some level of VOCs, but they can't exceed what that list is in COMAR. And I think it's pretty important to go over VOCs very briefly. It stands for volatile organic compounds. Basically, when someone is painting and the process of it drying emits VOCs. Not all, in a lot of different cases, VOCs are emitted, but definitely for paints. Volatile organic compounds are emitted as gases from certain solids or liquids, and commonly found in paints, lacquers, paint strippers, cleaning supplies, pesticides, and so on. There's a lot of different products that will emit VOCs when typically when being used. You see that a lot of these materials that they have listed there does give off some type of odor when it's being applied, like permanent markers, glues, adhesives, building materials. In this case, paint obviously gives off a smell when it's being applied. So the main target for purchasing green paint supplies is really looking at VOCs, really looking at reducing the amount of harmful chemicals being released as it's being used. And so a lot of the paint products that we want to target are the ones that are low VOC to no VOC. And here is the VOC content limits table. It's an extensive table, not just limited to all the things I have listed here. And then, so basically it has the name of the coating, and then next to it is the associated VOC limit in grams per liter. That's how they measure VOC content. And I've found, as I've been, learning more about paints and coatings, that typically it's pretty consistent among certifying bodies and department stores that sell paint. It's pretty consistent that 50 milligrams per liter, or less than 50 milligrams per liter, is considered low VOC. So I do want to mention that what you're seeing in these tables have higher concentrations, and that's because this is the limit that it must not exceed. This isn't like what qualifies as low VOC. So I just wanted to make that distinction. These are, this is basically the regulatory requirement that has to be followed, and then looking for low VOC will give you that green attribute, that requirement. So I'll get into what those product minimum requirements are for paint. And I want to also mention here that any one of these following attributes that are met is considered green. Don't have to stop there at one environmental attribute. The more environmental attributes, the better. But thus, everything is considered green here. So whether you have A, B, C, D, or E, or A and D, or C and B, it's all green. But I'm going over what would be probably the best option, and then followed up with what other ways can you find to green paint products. So I'll go through that. So again, must have one of the following attributes: A, an accepted third-party certification awarded for paints and coating products; B, minimum 50% post-consumer recycled content; C, an environmental product declaration or health product declaration; D, PFAS addressed. PFAS, known as the forever chemical that has been causing a lot of problems. E, a standard or eco-label listed in EPA's recommendations of specs, standards, and eco-labels for paint and coating products. So any one of these five is acceptable to require or to include for purchasing paint, and it will be considered green. So I'm going to go through each of these ones in a little bit more detail. So who are those? What are those eco labels that certify paint in this particular category. So this is a list of 7 eco-labels, but certainly not limited to these 7. There's probably a lot more that are international that we're not aware of, but the ones that are the most recognizable I've listed here. Green Seal, GreenWise, or GreenWise Gold, which is GreenWise Gold would be a higher tier certification, meeting more of that criteria. Master Painters Institute, Cradle to Cradle, South Coast Air Quality Management District, SCS Indoor Advantage Gold, or UL Green Guard. These images here on the right are the eco labels, and typically, in most cases, when you buy green paint, that eco label is on that paint can somewhere, and that's one of the best ways to verify that it is a green product by ensuring that it's labeled accurately, that it has that certification on the product itself. So for product minimum requirements, Green Seal, I like to use their example as, they have a long list of products that are certified under Green Seal. And in this case, paints and coatings, there, I believe, is over 100 that are on their certifier registry. The great thing about having these third-party certifications tied to, excuse me, I went ahead. The good thing about having these third-party certifications tied to the product itself is that it likely will address those other attributes that I just listed, like the PFAS address, or sometimes the recycled content is included into the certification process. So sometimes if it has that eco label, it meets multiple environmental attributes. And the great thing is that the third-party certifier has done all of that upfront work of auditing, verifying, testing the product based off of its own criteria and principles. Myself and Vicky like to say that eco labels are basically the Staples easy button for verifying a green product or for finding a green product. If it has that eco label, that's all that you need to ensure that it is a green product. Again, verified by a third party, so no greenwashing is done. Probably the most trusted thing that you can look for. I also added this slide to show that Amazon has really started to add more sustainability tags or sustainability features when you're actually going on Amazon buying certain products. And Green Seal is one of the recognized eco labels that Amazon includes when you're buying certain products. Again, Green Seal is not just limited to paints and coatings product category. There's other things like cleaning supplies and things like that. So what is actually listed here, I don't think is necessarily paint products, but this is just to point out that the environmental attributes are starting to be captured on Amazon, which is probably the most frequently used e-commerce platform that, in the world. So a big step forward there. There's been a big growing of the market for green paint. And so now that Amazon has recognized it, I feel like that will trickle down a lot more to the awareness of buyers. So we looked at Green Seal. Here's a couple of other examples. GreenWise, they also certify paint. They have different categories of paint products that they do certify. When you go to the certifier registry, it includes, who the manufacturer is, where it was made, what the product is. Again, the take-home point from looking at these certifier registries is the transparency that they have. it's pretty much an open book of here's our requirements, here's our criteria, here are the products and manufacturers and vendors that meet that criteria, and how long they have that certification for. Oops. MPI, Master Painters Institute product list. So they also are another third-party certifier for paints. They have different groups that they have categorized here. So finding which specific paint category it falls under, they have a long list of ones that they have in their approved product list. So I hope that after seeing that there's a lot of different resources to find what paint products will qualify as green because it's certified by them. So now that we've covered eco labels, again, if there is no eco label when you're purchasing, but there still is other environmental attributes that can be captured when purchasing paint. In this case, post-consumer recycled content, the requirement for this spec specifically is 50% post-consumer. There's actually a lot of paints that are verified by Green Seal that includes the post-consumer recycled content into the certification. So that's why I mentioned, like, if you have the Green Seal certification or the GreenWise certification, it's likely that it has recycled content and other sustainable features included into it. So 50% post-consumer recycled content verified by one of the following, that is SCS or UL environmental claim. There are also eco labels that just verify the recycled content specifically. So like SCS, they also verify indoor air quality, but they also verify recycled content for products. Because if someone claims to have 50% post-consumer recycled content, the best way to verify that through a third party. Sometimes manufacturers do have that information available, but this will be the most trusted source for that. So that's SCS, recycled content certified, and UL environmental claim validation for recycled content. And there are products out there that include recycled paint. Paint can actually very much so be reused because it has a relatively longer lifespan that it can be reused a second time. So this is just a snapshot of SCS, the one that verifies the recycled content. And what they do is they certify the percentage of recycled content, and they actually provide that chain of custody through the supply chain. So, and Vicky is sharing these links as well. I could go on more and more about how great the eco labels are and what they do, but just a general statement about how they verify the recycled content, I believe, is adequate enough. And if you're interested in looking more, then those links and resources are available. And everything is linked in the specification itself. So if you pull up the specification, all of the images that I have posted in these slides will pop up by clicking on the links in the spec. So C, an environmental product declaration or health product declaration. Environmental product declaration is basically a full disclosure of after kind of doing a life cycle analysis of the product, looking at what materials it has and its associated environmental impact with that. So this is a full disclosure statement. In this example, done by Sherwin-Williams, a very commonly known paint vendor. Which says here, this is an environmental product declaration for multi-purpose latex primer. It's a little bit hard to see But this multi-purpose primer and sealant have wide versatility and strong adhesion properties to make it universal favorite, meets the most stringent VOC regulations. And that signature right here is the most important thing, that someone conducted this product declaration. They looked into this specific multi-purpose latex primer, and through through their research found that it meets the stringent VOC regulations. So that's another way to verify a green product. Health product declarations are quite similar in how they look, but it's more looking at toxic chemicals and the human health risk associated with it. This is looking at the environmental impact associated with it. Along with other verified claims, there's also PFAS address standards that are done by third-party certifiers. So a couple of examples of that would be Cradle to Cradle, their material health certification, Safer Choice, which meets a lot of the EPA standards, and Declare, which looks at a lot of construction, interior construction materials, including paint. And so if it's PFAS addressed, that also qualifies it as a green product. Cradle to Cradle goes into their health standards for certain products. I believe Cradle to Cradle and Green Seal are probably the front runners in addressing PFAS in various products. And so just to give a small example, but anything that is made to be stain resistant, water resistant, have like a nice smooth surface so that it doesn't take any damage to inclement weather, very, very high chance that it has PFAS in there. So a lot of water resistant and stain resistant materials contain PFAS. And so there is, at times PFAS found in paint. So Cradle to Cradle recognized that, and so they developed this standard. Now they're at version 5, which has just been updated February 10th, 2026. So a very newly updated standard. And so that also can cover, because it's really it's addressing environmental health, but also human health a lot with the PFAS requirements. So last minimum requirement to make it qualify as a green product could be a standard or eco-label listed in EPA's recommendations of specs, standards, and eco-labels. In this case, they cover latex paint. They don't go that deep into primers, block fillers, different and other more specialty coatings that some of the third-party certifiers like Green Seal MPI do. But they have a good resource here for EPA eco-labels. I just did a simple search for paint, and I went ahead and said, why not click on the PFAS criteria one too, because we know that there's PFAS in paint. And so any of these eco-labels listed here are also acceptable. Green Seal is already in there. Master Painters Institute is in there. This list isn't just limited to these 5 right here. And Green Seal, as you can see here, addresses PFAS criteria as well. So a lot of different resources that can be used. And so just, to drive that home for buying paint, environmental certifications are best. There's also many other ways to go about it through recycled content, through either an EPD or an HPD, looking at PFAS, finding other new certifications that might be international, might be, you know, not as recognizable in the States, but still meets the criteria. So that covers the minimum requirements for purchasing paint. Now, of course, a lot of paints, depending on what it is, depending on the type of paint, is probably going to have toxic substances with it. So the handling of that excuse me, the handling of that is becoming more and more important. And in perfect timing, Maryland has launched the Paint Care program. So for end of life, state agencies must utilize a take-back program to send leftover paint for recycling. The drop-off locations for paint recycling have been determined by the Maryland Paint Care program. There is a list of different paint products that they include. What I like is that for smaller amounts of paint, 5 gallons or less, they recommend that you drop it off. But if there is a case where you have a very large amount of paint that needs to be recycled or handled properly, they can also do a pickup service through that paint care program. So when you're done with the paint, it has to go through the paint care program and be utilized. Very good resources on this Maryland Paint Care program page. It probably will explain things much better than I can explain to you right now, but there's over 100 different drop-off locations that are in that region. So over 100 different drop-off locations. If you look at the drop-off site locator, it will have a map that you can locate, you know, maybe something close to your house or close to your office that might work. But on the left side, it'll have the location, the phone number, the address, and then also what accepted products they take. All of them accept paint. All of them will accept paint. Some of them also accept household hazardous waste. And this I also copied right out of their website. So their images I utilized to just go through in detail of what the Paint Care program will accept and what they won't. So when purchased, the Paint Care fee is applied, and then the products are accepted at no additional cost when dropped off. So, and the things that we have listed in our spec, right? The interior and exterior latex paints, all of the different coatings, floor, deck, wood coatings, primers and sealers, and some other different types of paints as well, metal coatings we also have included in our spec. So a lot of these that we have requirements for do qualify for the Paint Care program. The one thing I do want to point out is that for things that are not accepted, one of the things that we do cover in our spec is traffic and road marking paints. That is the only one that I think that we have listed here that would not be accepted. So the following are non-Paint Care products that are not included in the program. When purchased, Paint Care fee is not applied. They are not accepted in Paint Care's participating drop-off sites. Okay, so we covered all of the requirements of the specification. These are other considerations to keep in mind for purchasing or handling paints and coatings, right? So we know that VOCs are a big thing that we want to limit. And again, low VOC for most paints is about less than 50 grams per liter. For some of the more glossy finishes, I read that 100 grams per liter is about that range. So in most cases, 50 grams per liter. In some cases, some specialty coatings go to about 100. But again, a lot of our considerations are thinking about the VOCs. So the use of water-based paints over oil-based paint is definitely recommended. Water-based paints, they generally are much lower in VOCs, significantly lower. That also is much cleaner to use. And the thing that I've also started to see as well is that the lifespan of low VOC paint typically has been lasting longer and longer. So VOCs are much higher in oil-based paints than water-based latex paints. The use of light-colored paints, so also, you know, the pigments may decrease the durability of paint, and so they basically, the lighter colored paints contain fewer pigments and thus less VOCs. But they are a little bit more reflective, increasing the dispersion of light and potentially reducing the requirements for and consumed energy by artificial light. So just another thing, and not all cases is that going to be you know, applicable where everything has to be light colored. But again, these are things that can, if the option is available, then we definitely recommend choosing the lower VOC option, basically. Using bio-based paint as an alternative to synthetic paint, bio-based products are going to be more sustainable, right? You know, not having to use different, you know, chemicals and other virgin materials to make the paint if it comes, you know, directly from the earth. That also is going to, you know, have a much better impact on our human health and environmental health as well. So moving on to packaging recommendations, I think we've covered pretty much everything related to buying paint, handling the end of life of paint, and what other considerations can you implement for buying paint. And so now it's more so of other sustainability aspects that we keep in mind for, well, pretty much purchasing anything, but in this case, paint. But there's packaging recommendations where a contractor uses packaging in addition to manufacturer packaging. They're encouraged to select the packaging that minimizes or eliminates the use of disposable containers or incorporates recycled content. Using reusable crates and pallets preferred over boxed packaging so that it can be reused multiple times is one of the big recommendations. If corrugated cardboard packaging must be used, the contractors are strongly encouraged to use that packaging or use the cardboard packaging that contains, in this case, 25% minimum post-consumer materials. That is listed in the EPA's comprehensive procurement guidelines, where they have among different categories when they're looking at paper, different types of paper. That's their recommended 25. That's their recommended post-consumer recycled content is 25%. So if cardboard packaging and boxes must be used, then select the use recycled packaging. Shipping and transport recommendations. I think a lot of people are unaware of how much CO2 is emitted through driving and transportation. So we have these in basically all of our specifications. So for fuel efficiency, reducing greenhouse gases and air pollutions, those contractors strongly encouraged to use SmartWay. And SmartWay, there's a list of SmartWay partners. They can, make a more optimized trip so that they're, don't have to drive as much and still are able to, get everything shipped and transported on time, but also using, either using an EV or using, plug-in hybrid vehicle, or just using a more efficient route to get those commodities to you. All right, reporting requirements, which I could talk all day about, but I will only talk about briefly. But in the specification, we do have reporting requirement language that is definitely we need reporting for if for anything that is purchased by the state. But if we're buying green paint or we're not buying green paint, we need to be able to track that, and we need to be able to see where the state is with our paint purchases, whether our state funds are being put towards the green product. And if not, then that's, through those data reports, that's where we can see and try to make improvements on. So this language is really important to include into the solicitation if it doesn't already exist. The contractor shall submit quarterly sales data to the state over the life of this contract. The vendor reporting template we have included. Thanks for joining us, David. I know you told me that you had a meeting at 3, so thanks for coming.
No problem. Thank you.
So basically we provide the vendor green sales report template. The contractor just has to use it for everything that they sold to the state. So if they sold 50 paint cans of Green Seal certified or PFAS addressed paint, they need to include that by line item in those quarterly reports. And so by them submitting a response to the solicitation, the bidder or offer acknowledges a commitment to submitting quarterly vendor green sales, sending reports to the state on a quarterly basis. Vendors who fail to do that could be out of compliance and therefore could be issued a cure notice from the procurement officer. And so if this language is not in the contract, then, which myself and Vicky have experienced, is that if they're not contractually obligated to send reports, they're most likely not going to, unless they are helping us out and are trying to retroactively go back and follow statutory requirements. So including this language in future solicitations is a big key point for getting that reporting. Just some images of our reporting template, how basic information about the product to be filled out, when it was purchased, who the vendor is, what the product is, what the SKU or the product ID is. And then in those green columns are going to be those environmental attributes. We have drop-down menus of all the different eco-labels that Maryland recognizes. So the template has been updated about a little over a year ago now. And so basically that is, the platform for contractors to submit their data. There's also tables showing what eco-labels that we recognize as an accepted eco-label by the state, all of the different product categories that eco-label falls under. So this is kind of like a reference table for what eco-labels are out there and what product categories do they cover. So that's a sheet included into the vendor template. All right, so last order of business will be the submittal requirements. Bidders' offers shall provide the following documents with their bids/proposals. So we need proof of any environmental claims, any required certifications listed in minimum requirements section that we had. So proof would look something like a link to the Green Seal's website for their certified paint. Could be, documentation of recycled content verification from the vendor or manufacturer. Ideally, we would want that to be from a third-party certifier, but some type of documentation that they can provide as well could be acceptable. The manufacturer. Link to the certifier's website, or a link to the UL Spot or Ecomedes website. I'll just briefly say that those are certification aggregators that have all certifications known that are available that cover specific product categories. So it's basically a big database for environmental certifications. So a link to that where the product is listed is also acceptable. So bidders, offers who suggest products that are not certified but meet the recycled content requirement, they are required to provide a list of those products with their bids and offers, and it must include what that percentage of recycled content is. If it says contains post-consumer recycled content, we need to know that percentage, because 100% post-consumer recycled content makes a big difference from 5%. So just as long as they have that percentage listed in their bids or offers. Okay, well, I think we covered everything with paints and coatings, and I'm going to leave it open for any questions that you all may have. Let's see, there's still 30 minutes left. If anyone has any questions about the paints and coatings spec, or if anyone, well, if anyone has any general comments about our specifications too, this would be a good time for it. But if you don't have any more questions, you are definitely free to go. And thank you for joining us today. Also,